So I have kale, coconut water, apple, and spinach super juice. Yeah, I'm gonna need this. Guys, I've done many ranking videos on this channel for specific directors such as like Paul Thomas Anderson, Wes Anderson, Christopher Nolan, Tim Burton, the list goes on. And I got so many requests for Lars von Trier, and I swear I wasn't putting you guys off. It wasn't that I was just blowing you guys off completely. He's just a director that it took me a year to watch all of his movies because I found him to be very daunting. I'll get more into that later on. But again, you guys can see I wasn't blowing you off because voila, here's this ranking video. So guys, Lars von Trier's films ranked worst to best. And of course, my opinion, he's done 14 films. 14 is going to be worst, 1 being his best, and of course, my opinion. So, all that exposition aside, let's get started with my number 14, which is Epidemic. Quite disappointing. Not much to this movie. I saw it late at night, and as soon as it ended, I was like, I'm not going to remember this movie, and it's going to be fun talking about it on my ranking video. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Epidemic. I don't really remember this movie. I saw it, though. I saw it. My number 13 is The Idiots, which so many people on Letterboxd love it. I get why they like it. The amateur style of the filmmaking is, intriguing to say the least, and it is definitely a swing for the fence that I can appreciate from afar. Not a bad movie, just kind of disappointing. I like the fact that he was kind of tackling almost like a coming-of-age story, but it's pretty forgettable for me other than that. So yeah, that's my number 13. Again, I understand why people like it, but just kind of So that's my number 13. My number 12 is Europa. This was actually the last movie of his that I saw before being able to say, hey, I've seen all of his movies. Europa is von Trier tackling the neo-noir genre, and I think that it's definitely something that I appreciate that he was tackling, because von Trier is a director where you can't really pitch him into like just one genre. Like certain directors, you can. Like Nolan, as much as I love him, you can pitch him as like a action director with cerebral ideas. With von Trier, it's like, okay, he's known for his graphic nature in terms of movies, but he's not really just one genre. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying that someone that loves Nolan, but it's just kind of interesting to see him tackling the neo-noir genre. But it doesn't really stand out on its own, other than you watch all of his movies and you say, okay, this is von Trier tackling this genre, but does he fully succeed? I don't think it really stands out, other than the fact that, again, it's him tackling this genre. But, again, that's just my personal opinion. Not a bad movie, but middle of the road. So that's my number 12. My number 11 is The Boss of It All. Again, von Trier, man. He did neo-noir with My Last Entry. Now, this one, he did a straight-up office comic. I don't think this movie's bad. Again, much the same way as Europa, I appreciate it for him tackling something that, my goodness, when you think of von Trier, you would not think he would tackle this. I think some of the comedy works. Most of it, though, kind of falls flat for me personally. Again, I like the workplace atmosphere. I think that it's very intriguing, to say the least. Some of the dialogue's interesting, but I couldn't really get on board with like the characters. The story overall, overarching, wasn't that intriguing. And, I didn't really take much from it other than, oh, cool, von Trier, you did your thing, but you did it in a comedy. And, wow, that was kind of cool. Other than that, it's middle of the road. So that is, of course, my number 11. My number 10 is a movie that's on Criterion, I believe, and so many people really do like this movie, and I guess I can see why. But my number 10 is The Element of Crime. This is a film that, well, it's not bad. I appreciate the fact that von Trier, this was earlier in his filmography, I appreciate that he definitely was utilizing his style in a very intriguing way. So I appreciate it from that front. The filmmaking itself is rock solid, but again, I wasn't really invested in anything that was happening other than looking afar and watching and saying, wow, von Trier, I like this style, I like the stylistic approach that you're going with this movie, but I'm not really going to grasp and remember any of this. I can go back and Letterboxd and see what my thoughts were, but other than that, it's a movie that as I'm doing this video, I'm like, yeah, I saw that, but my goodness, like, it didn't really stick out. It's a shame, really, because again, it's on Criterion. Criterion movies, they stick out for most people, because they have artistic merits. But again, I think the artistic merits for me personally, it just kind of relies on the filmmaking, and that's all. Not a bad movie, but again, I'm just being honest, I wasn't a huge fan of it. And, excuse me, that is why it was my number 10. My number 9 is actually the movie that I first saw where I was like, oh, Von Trier. My number 9 is Melancholy. I saw Melancholy for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago. That was my only time I watched it, I should say. But I saw it, and the reason why I watched it was because I wanted to get into Von Trier's movies. I was like kind of like nervous getting into his movies, but I wanted to start off kind of like, you know, just dabbling my feet, not getting into like his more graphic movies. Because, you know, you hear all the stories, it's like, oh, that's going to be hard to watch. Melancholy, I didn't really hear that it was hard to watch, but my goodness, the depressive nature of this movie, it is kind of like, oh, wow, like, you know, imagine if there was graphic stuff that was going on top of that. So it's definitely, I think, a movie that, you know, if you want to get into Von Trier's filmography, I would highly recommend you watch it. I appreciate the aesthetics. The cinematography is really intriguing, to say the least. It almost feels like it's in the mind of Kirsten Dunst in terms of like, you know, it's very depressive looking, kind of like the lead character. The acting's good. I do think that the themes, again, are very intriguing, especially knowing that Von Trier was in a similar spot while making this movie. I do think the movie is very dull, though, at least when I saw it 3-4 years ago, but it stuck with me. You know, it stuck with me all these years later, and I do want to rewatch it to see if it's kind of like a Tree of Life situation. See, the Tree of Life, when I saw it 9 years ago, I wasn't a fan of it. I actually didn't like it, and I actually wasn't able to finish it. But I decided to give it a second chance a couple years after that, and then each time I would watch it, it grew on me more and more. Until now, it's in my eyes a masterpiece. So I'm curious if that would be the case with Melancholia, because again, it did marinate pretty well in my memory. So I am curious about what my thoughts would be going back to it. But again, the pacing still kind of stuck out to me, where I was like, oh man, this is a long movie, and then it's only like 2 hours and 15 minutes or something like that. So not a bad movie, and definitely a movie that I would recommend 100%. So that was my number 9. My number 8 is a movie that I feel like you don't really hear too much about in terms of Von Trier, but it is a movie that's technically a sequel to one of his other movies, and Mandelay is my number 8. Mandelay is a movie that, for better or worse, I really found the premise intriguing. See, the premise is tackling something that I feel like no American director would dare kind of like try to tackle, because it is kind of like, it's almost taboo. And I feel like it's a director's vision of where it's like, wow, I can't believe you went there. That's wow, that's oh man. Again, I don't want to get too into it, because I do think that it's very underrated. I feel like it's kind of hard to find too. But if you do come across it, I would give this movie a watch. Bryce Dallas Howard kills it in the lead role. I think she gives a great performance. And it is definitely a movie that will stick with you 100%, even if it does have its fair share of issues. But yeah, that's my number 8. My number 7 is a movie that a lot of Von Trier film buffs really jerk off this movie really hard. I personally wasn't a big fan of this movie, but from a filmmaking perspective, I really respect this movie. The filmmaking is top notch. Von Trier kills it with the cinematography, the golden hue of the way this film looks. The way it's directed, the acting, the premise, my goodness, the premise is amazing. I just think it was the execution of certain elements towards the end that kind of got a bit monotonous. Kind of like Melancholy, I watched this recently, like within the last, I say 6 months, but I just found myself very dulled by this movie in a lot of places, which stinks, because I do think it has a very strong first act. Maybe I'll give it a second chance, but I just wasn't a big fan of it, especially not as much as other people. I think it is definitely a movie that, it's okay, it's not bad, and I did want to, say that, again, maybe I'll rewatch it at some point, I don't know though. For now, it's definitely going to be one of those movies where I'll remember as like, I was kind of dulled by this, unfortunately. So that's my number 7. My number 6 is Nymphomaniac, Part 2. This ending, man, number 6, the ending of Nymphomaniac Part 2, is crazy. It really is. I think the ending is incredible. It might be Von Trier's best movie ending. Actually, maybe second best. It's crazy. It's really crazy. And I think it works, though. And I am very curious upon rewatching it, what I'm going to think about it in terms of, because this is part 2, and I feel like it's going to recontextualize part 1 and even part 2 with certain things that happen. But I do like this movie. So Nymphomaniac Part 2, I like it, but I like Part 1 a little bit more. And I can get into that now because My number 6 is obviously part 2. My number 5 is Nymphomaniac part 1. I think Nymphomaniac part 1, it really grabs you and really gets you into the world of what you are about to experience. It's very graphic, you know, as Von Trier's films would later become well known for, but it's purposefully graphic. It makes sense as to why it's graphic, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because I feel like you need to tackle this topic very abrasively, very graphically, because it makes you pay attention. It makes you kind of realize that, you know, this is very realistic. I mean, the approaches to all these sex scenes feel very much so like you're not supposed to be watching this. You know what I'm saying? Like, music really isn't that utilized during these scenes. There's some issues that some of the characters have. There's certain, like, rashes and everything. There's also, I don't know how realistic there is, but the lead character is talking about, now this scene I don't think I would ever talk about on YouTube, but I think it's interesting to say the least. Part 1 has it where there's a scene of the lead character talking about all the different kind of penises that she's seen. And you get to see all those penises. So watching this at like 1 o'clock a.m., it was quite an eye-opener. I was like, oh wow, like holy cow. Like I've never seen that in a movie before, and I give it originality points for that alone. Did I want to see that? No. But again, I really respect that Von Trier went there, because holy cow, he's got balls. Pun intended. But yeah, that's my number 5. It's intriguing. It's an intriguing movie. Part 1 and 2, I definitely want to rewatch. You'll look at my letterbox, you'll see I gave both a 3 out of 5, but that's 3 out of 5 when I was watching it. Doesn't mean that, you know, I don't want to rewatch them, because I do. I think that part 1 and 2 are very much so movies that I can't get out of my mind. I can't. And I feel like that's a good thing, though, because Von Trier's style, man, it really got under me, and I like those movies. I really do. So yeah, that's my number 5. Number 4, I like a little bit more. I don't love it the way a lot of people do, but it stuck with me. My number 4 is Dancer in the Dark. So many people love this movie. I see on Letterboxd so many people give this movie like 4.5, 5 and a 5-star ratings, and I guess I can see why. But I think that, per usual with Von Trier, his movies are paced in a way that kind of feels awkward at times. I liked the originality. Again, kind of like the Nymphomaniac movies, I liked the originality. I liked his style. His style was really intriguing in this. Like, I mentioned how sometimes his movies kind of feel amateurish with the way they're shot, but it's purposeful. And Days of Dark is definitely an example of that. It feels purposeful with the way it's shot. And it's interesting, especially because it's shot with like a camera that isn't of high quality as like other cameras that came out during that time. And I feel like that was intentional, because it's Von Trier. Like, all of his movies aren't like, you know, grainy. Well, when I say grainy, I mean obviously most of his movies are shot on film. But when I say grainy, I mean like they were done with a lesser camera. Not all of them are. So like, I think it's definitely stylistic choices when he decides to use those type of cameras. I definitely felt the purpose in Dancer in the Dark with that, and I really respected that. I do think the movie's a little too long. I like the depressive nature, but again, I just thought it was too long and kind of awkwardly paced at times. Still, I respect this movie, and again, I do like the purposeful cinematography choice that they used. So that's my number 4. My goodness, number 3. Number 3 is Antichrist. This movie I saw a year ago, pretty much. It was around the time that I decided to, you know, muster up the courage and rank his movies. And I decided to get what, you know, you hear the most graphic one is. I decided to get that one out of the way. And number 3, with Antichrist. Antichrist I liked. I want to rewatch it. I do. And let me tell you, the imagery I'm never going to forget, because it's very raw, it's very visceral. It feels very much so, again, like you're watching something that you shouldn't be, but it's done in such a very stylistic and engrossing way. Like, I definitely found myself very much so invested with these characters, which a lot of times with his films I can't really say that, but I was definitely able to say it with Antichrist. And I don't know, man. Like, I gave it like a 3 out of 5, but it's one of the best 3 out of 5 movies I saw. I think especially, like, again, the marinating process, like a lot of his other entries that I mentioned, that marination process, man, it really does kind of like say, hey, that's a good movie. That's a movie that will stick with you long after you've seen it. And again, I respect that a lot of people love this movie. I really do, because I get it. I really do get it. It's a beautiful movie, man. It really is. But that's my number 3. My number 2 is actually a movie I didn't really have to wait too long to see because, again, a lot of these movies I was kind of late to. But my number 2 I saw as soon as it came out near me, and that was The House That Jack Built. I remember getting this movie and really liking it. I like this movie a lot. This movie really stuck with me, man. I mean, Matt Dillon's a great actor. I really like him, but him as a serial killer, I mean, my goodness, he was amazing in the role. And it's not just that, also. I feel like the side characters also have their own kind of, like, intriguing, nature. And there's some, like, tongue-in-cheek things that are going on in this movie. Some very humorous scenes that I think really worked. Oh, obviously some more graphic scenes, and the graphic scenes really are graphic, but I feel like Von Trier never loses or sways his messages and themes that he's going for, and I really like that. Is the movie original? Yeah, you betcha. This is a movie that you watch it, you feel like, okay, I've seen movies about serial killers before, but not done in this way. I think that he does such a good job in this movie with directing it. Is it kind of pretentious with some things? Yeah, sure. Like when he's talking about art, like, the narrator's talking about art, and Von Trier's literally showing some of his movies while that's playing. It's like, okay, that's kind of pretentious, but I still liked it. Yeah, I liked The House That Jack Built a lot. I think it's a good movie. That's why it's my number 2. My number 1 is the movie that came first before Mandelay. My number 1 is Dogville. Dogville was a movie that it took me a little bit to get into the rhythm, the style, the way that everything was acted and played out, literally, so to speak. Once I did, though, I really was able to levitate and really care about everything that was going on. It felt very cathartic, too, with the ending. It was very much so something that I was grappling with that ending, with what to think, and I liked that. I really dug the ending of Dogville. I think that it holds up all together on its own as well. The acting across the board, again, is great. Nicole Kidman kills it in this role. The models, the miniature models almost like as houses was a very good idea. It's original, man. It's really original. It's very much so a movie that takes its time, but by the time the ending comes around, it's well worth it. It's the why it took its time. And I definitely like this movie. I think that it's definitely, in my opinion, his best movie as of right now. So yeah, guys, that's Lars von Trier's movies ranked from worst to best by me. Now I'm going to talk about Von Trier. I'm not going to lie. So again, as I mentioned earlier in the review, I was very nervous to rank Lars von Trier's movies because he's a director that is very much so you either love him or hate him, from what I've noticed, and especially on Letterboxd. People go ape for him. People really love his work. So I was nervous. I was really nervous going into it, especially, you hear all the graphic stuff in his movies. And I'm not put off by graphic stuff, but you just have to be in the mood. You have to be in the mood for like a really depressive movie that usually I am. But I don't know, with Von Trier, like, I guess it was just kind of like the hype of how depressive his movies are as to why I was nervous. I mean, that's why it took me a year to watch all 14 of his movies. But I got a comment at this point when I'm doing this review a couple days ago from Low Life Media who asked me, do you think Lars movies are objectively bad, okay, or do you not like his style of filmmaking? And he was saying everything I've seen, excluding Nymphomaniac, I've loved. And I answered his comment, but I want to answer it obviously in this video too. I don't think that he is a bad director. I think that he is a good director, actually. Just because I rate a lot of his movies like a 3 out of 5 doesn't mean I think he's bad. It's just one of those things where I have issues with his movies. There's certain things where I just can't really say 5 out of 5 because there's just certain things I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of the way his movies are paced. Sometimes the stylistic choices don't really work for me personally. And again, in terms of rewatchability, for a lot of his movies, it just doesn't really come across to me that I can rewatch it, or even that I take a lot from it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to be able to say that. Do I like him as a director? Yes. If someone were to have a gun to my head and ask, do I like Lars von Trier? I would say, yeah. Because I always spout about originality. I always spout about how I want unique experiences. And Von Trier gives that to you. Even if you think one of his movies is just okay, you're still getting a lot out of it. I mean, like I said, a movie like Melancholy or Breaking the Waves, I think were just okay. but I got a lot out of it. So it almost seems contradictory, but I still really appreciate that he is a director that goes for it. He goes for the jugular, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't, but I still find him to be a very interesting director. From now on, when I see that Lars von Trier is directing a movie, you best believe I'm going to be there in the theater and watch it, because he is very talented. His style and filmmaking, I think it's good. I think that it's sometimes coming off as like amateurish, but that's kind of the point sometimes. Other times there's like a very rapid way that he goes about shooting it, which I kind of find intriguing. And I think that he always directs the actors in a very well done way. So yeah, overall, just because I am like kind of split where like half of his movies I'm kind of like about, doesn't mean I don't find him to be a good director. I think he's a good director. Not one of my favorites, but still, I think he's a good director. He's very talented, and I really do like that he goes outside of what other people would have in terms of like a box. You know, a director that is able to go to different genres and like say, listen, I want to do this artistically where I focus on something new. That's something that I really have to emphasize that I really find meritable. And it's why von Trier, I think, is a good director. Again, not one of my favorite, but I do think he is a good director. So, guys, Lars von Trier, what do you think about him? Do you like him? Are you a fan of his? Are you not? Let me know in the comment section down below. And also, rank his movies down below as well. Very, very curious to hear your guys' thoughts. And let's keep things civil in the comment section. And as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll catch you guys later.